How do we recognize a king? That can be difficult. We all know one when we see him in a deck of cards. We see the King of Hearts and the King of Diamonds and the King of Spades and King of Clubs. And we know they are kings because they are wearing a crown. If we see the King of England at a formal ceremony, we recognize that he is a king because he is sitting on a throne and wearing the crown. But if a person doesn't look like a king, how do we know that we are in the presence of one? The Emperor Franz Joseph ruled for 68 years, the most powerful man of the 19th century and the early part of the 20th. The most powerful woman, of course, was Queen Victoria, sitting on the throne of England for nearly as long. Franz Joseph was at heart a simple man who loved simple pleasures. One day he went out hunting with two of his friends, dressed in simple peasant hunter's clothes. On the way back from the hunt, they were walking down the dusty road. A poor peasant farmer stopped and took pity on these three tired men in their dirty clothes. He picked them up and gave him a lift on his cart. The farmer said to one of them, "What is your name?" The man said, "I am the King of Saxony." The farmer looked at him and said, "Sure you are." He looked at the next one and asked, "And what is your name?" He replied, "I am the King of Bavaria." The farmer just shook his head, looked at Franz Joseph and said, "And I suppose you are the Emperor of Austria." And of course he was. We don't know a king when we see him. 2,000 years ago, if you had passed the hill of execution in Jerusalem and seen 3 prisoners being put to death, you would not have known that you were in the presence of a king. Who could have blamed you? The people there, who hours before had acclaimed Jesus as king in the triumphal procession into the city, were now looking up at a naked, suffering, bleeding, dying man hanging between 2 other naked, suffering, bleeding, dying men. They didn't recognize a king. None of them did, except the thief hanging next to him. He did recognize him as a king and said, "Remember me in your kingdom." He alone knew that this was someone special dying next to him, that this man had a kingdom. He felt the privilege of being next to a king. It was in that moment of Jesus' greatest weakness that he was truly at his strongest, his most powerful. Only a king, and only this king, could have made the promise spoken to the thief. "Today you will be with me in paradise." We are surrounded by kings and queens, and we don't even realize it. We pass them by without knowing in whose presence we are standing. Each human being has a personal dignity. Each human being, no matter how lowly, is a king or a queen, has his own dominion, which is his own soul. And each human being should be treated with respect and reverence as becoming the dignity of the king, the queen that they are. How many times do we walk by people on the street and look down upon them, rather than reflecting that we are in the presence of someone unique and special? To God, each of us is special. To God, each of us is a king. It is only we who often do not see the crown, even on ourselves. The one who is able to recognize the king in the least of his brothers and sisters is the only one who is able to look up at the dying man on the cross and recognize the king. The one who does not see the king in his brothers and sisters will certainly not recognize the king in the dying man on the cross. In the shadow of the cross, we look at each other in a whole new light. When in that shadow and in that light, we finally recognize the king in our neighbor, we will look up to the man on the cross and hear those words, "You too will be with me in my kingdom."